I was stationed aboard the USS Santa Fe, which is a fast attack submarine based out of Pearl Harbor. The Navy does not have the stop-loss program, which allows the military to keep service members past their active duty enlistment, so I was able to get out of the military. The first thing I'd like to talk about is one of my shipmates on the Santa Fe used to always, when he'd see other people, call them the N-word, and basically no one ever said anything about it, including myself. And it kind of struck me the first time when there was a new first-class petty officer from one of the divisions back at the smoke pit in the engine room, and I walked up there I walked up the ladder from Shaft Alley to the smoke pit, and he's like, "Hey, N-word, how's it going?" to me. And this new first class had been in the military probably 13 or 14 years, said nothing about, his language or his racism or anything. So it was a very accepting culture in the military to accept racism towards other people. On 9/11, I was actually in school. I was sent back July 4th of 2001 from Bahrain to go to some schooling for the military. And I was in Petty Officer Leadership School, which you need to take that school in order to take the advancement exam. And I got a phone call at about 5 o'clock in the morning from the boat saying that we needed to report back immediately. Since we had just gotten back from deployment, they thought they might send us back to the Middle East because when you're deployed on Western Pacific deployment, you are fully loaded with Tomahawks. All of your vertical launch tubes are full, and there's extra Tomahawks in the torpedo room that can be launched out of their torpedo tubes. So we weren't sure what was going to happen at that point. On that day and the following days after, there was a number of racist remarks that I heard, ranging from a chief petty officer who had been in about 15 years, who said that we needed to make a glass parking lot out of Afghanistan and make these people pay for what they had done to us. I also heard the people of Afghanistan referred to as raghead or towelhead from numerous people that were above me in rank, and at that time I was a second-class petty officer, which is an E5, and there were no remarks made by anyone else in the room, including myself, against their racist remarks. On one of our little sea adventures after that, where we go out for a couple weeks and do different testing and stuff like that, my chief petty officer, who was an E7, he was in for about 19 and a half years or 20 years at that point. He was getting ready to retire. He made up a list. You may have watched the Letterman show, and he has the top 10 list every night. Well, his list was top 10 reasons you might be a terrorist. And number one was that you know how to spell Afghanistan. And to me, that was very sickening that someone in a leadership position like that would make a statement like that and think it was a great joke. For the next part of my testimony, I'm going to talk a little bit about sexism that I saw in the military. On our first deployment in 1999, after we left Guam, we made a surprise trip to the Philippines. We were the first submarine to go there in about 8 years since they had closed down the base there following the eruption of the volcano. And when we got there, there was a E7 chief petty officer for one of the other divisions who knew some of his old friends from the military that owned prostitution bars basically in the surrounding areas. And he had a coin, and on one side was a woman's breast, and on the other side was a woman's behind, and he was showing it off like it was a very good thing. And he said, "Come on, boys, let's go into town and have some fun." On our 2001 deployment, we went to Chinhae, South Korea, which is attached to a U.S. Army base. I'm not sure which one because we weren't there too long. And basically, when you leave base, if you want to go to the prostitution areas, all you have to do is make a hand signal, and you do that, and they take you to the prostitution areas. I would also like to talk about discrimination that was towards U.S. military members. In 2001, on our deployment, we stopped in Sasebo, Japan. That's about 20-30 miles from Nagasaki, which was hit by a nuclear bomb during World War II. And numerous shopkeepers or store owners would shoo us out of the business, tell us to leave. They didn't want us there because they still hated the U.S. for what they had done back during World War II. A couple things I'm going to talk about now from a book called The Sorrows of Empire by Chalmers Johnson. It talks about military bases around the country, and I'd just like to read a couple things and make some comments. This comment here is about Bahrain, and it says, many servicemen regard duty in Bahrain as the best posting in the Gulf. Unlike in Saudi Arabia, which is connected to Bahrain by the King Fahd Causeway, Americans can drink alcohol in Bahrain. Like I said, I met the boat in 1999 in Bahrain. At that point, we were allowed to go off base, and there were a couple places that served alcohol. And I remember I got there, and one of the E6s had a second E5 that had puked in his rack because he got so drunk the night before, so he was pretty pissed off because he flew over there with, there was about 8 of us that went into Bahrain to meet with the boat. So clearly you could drink off base. When we were there in June of 2001, before September 11th, we tied up to the pier and we left within an hour and 5 minutes. I know it was over an hour because we had to do a different main engine warm-up to warm up the main turbines that drive the boat through the water. And they said there was a security threat and some type of terrorist threat that was, we had to leave the base immediately and get out of there. Another thing I would like to talk about is Diego Garcia. I don't know how many people in here have heard of the island of Diego Garcia, but I'll read a little bit out of this book. Before the 1991 Gulf War, the only other territory in the region, he's talking about the Middle East area, securely in American hands was the Indian Ocean island of Diego Garcia. It had been a British possession since England seized it from France during the Napoleonic Wars. In 1965, the British split Diego Garcia off from Mauritius, setting it up as a British Indian Ocean territory, and that's what it was referred to when we were there in 2001 as the British Indian Ocean Territory. And then they loaned it rent-free to the U.S. for 55 years. They deported the whole civilian population of the island to other islands where the people who were deported live in poverty and face racial discrimination. In 2001, the Department of Defense said that there were more buildings on Diego Garcia than military personnel. 654 buildings on that base. While we were there, there was B-52s that we could hear in the background warming up their engines in the morning. And it was, I mean, you could get beer in the bar there for 50 cents because everything that was shipped there was old. Mountain Dews that you bought in the store were expired. You could only use a credit card at the PX during certain hours because they had to be the right lineup with the satellite to get that available to them. One other thing I'd like to talk about here is about the Philippines again, and he says the bases had given rise to a huge drug and sex industry employing thousands of poor Filipino women, and it pretty much remained until I was there in 1999, even though the U.S. had closed their bases. One other comment he has is all Filipinos believe the United States kept atomic weapons ready for use at Subic and Clark, 2 military bases in the Philippines. When we visited in December of 1999, it was the only port call that I can remember where they told us if the media asked us about nuclear weapons, we were told to tell them that we can neither confirm nor deny that we carry nuclear weapons. And never during the 4 years I was attached to that submarine did we carry nuclear weapons because it was a pain for everyone on the boat because it would have required radiation monitoring of the forward personnel who would have been around the nuclear weapons that would have been stored in the torpedo room, and it will also displace the personnel who had to sleep in the torpedo rooms. So, thank you.